In this tutorial we'll be looking at getting a little bit creative with our photos, and basically with this one how to extract the subject that we want from quite a tricky background. So first of all, this photo is not one of my own, it's by a man called Les Wiggin, who supplied the photo and asked the question. A great photographer with Cannock Photographic Society. So no appraisal for the photograph from me, it's not my photo. So we're just going to go over the different ways that we can go about this, and there are lots of different ways. But basically the first thing to remember is when we look at a photograph, it's to analyse what's going to be the best way to actually subtract this from the background. There are some ways easier than others, but for different parts of the actual image. If we look at the horse itself, it's quite bright, so it's a white horse, which will help us use one method. And if we look at the other part, now the odd parts to extract on this are not the actual horse and the woman as such, it's simply the woman's hair and the horse's mane and tail. So those are the areas that are going to be the tricky part. And you can use select and mask. It does a reasonable job, but it doesn't do a perfect job. And you can mess around for hours trying to get the result that you want when there's an easier approach. So the first thing we're going to do is to use channels to actually subtract the horse's mane and the tail. So we're not worried about any other part of the image, we're just looking at those two areas. So the first thing we need to do is to look at the channels, and on the channels we're working RGB, so red, green and blue channels. The RGB is all of the channels mixed together, which gives us a colour photo, and if we click on the others, if we click on red for instance, it gives us a mono version of the actual parts of the image that are red or contain red. If I click on green, you can see the contrast is different on every photo. And what we're looking for, if we look at the horse, we're looking for the best contrast between the background, the horses and the horse's mane. And a good thing to look at this is because we've got quite a dark, this banding on the horse, you can see the contrast is very similar. So it's a dark actual colour for the band on the horse's face there, the muzzle and whatever, harness rather, whatever it's called. I'm no horse rider. So what we're looking for is the best contrast of those. So going down the channels, if I click on green, you see the contrast's a bit better on that. If we look at this, it stands out much more, the dark against the white. And if I click on blue, I can see straight away that that's the best one. That's where we're getting the most contrast. So this is the channel that I'm going to use. And what I want to do first of all is to duplicate this actual blue channel. So if I right click on it and select duplicate channel, and we get a blue copy, and we'll leave it as that. We'll say OK. And this actually doesn't do anything to the image whatsoever. It's just going to be used for a way to select the actual image. So once we've got this, what I want to do is to adjust the histogram on this, or the curves. So we're going to have a play, or the levels rather, not the curves. We're going to play with the levels and try to get that histogram so we've got a better contrast between the dark and the light areas. Making sure that this is displayed. We must make sure that the eye is displayed first, so click to make sure that the eye is displayed, and we're just looking at this blue copy and not the blue channel as well. So I take the eye off on that, put the eye on this, and then press Command L, and we will get the levels come up. Now if you've got a PC, I think it's Control L to get the levels to come up. You'll have to investigate. I think it's Control L. So that will give you the levels. So basically what we want to do is to use these sliders to make the dark darker. Now if we look at the histogram here, which is like the little mountain shape there, the left hand side depicts the dark areas the left hand side depicts the light areas, and these little sliders at the bottom, if I click this one on the left and drag it down, it will give more contrast to the dark areas. So I want to take this down as much as I can without, I'm going to use my special word here, crumping, without crumping up the white too much. And then on the right hand side, if I drag this one in, that will brighten up the white. Yeah, probably don't want to do that too much. I want to bring these, so I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to bring down this dark area, making sure that I'm leaving enough, and the middle one will give us more shadow in the middle area of the image, so we'll take down the middle tones. I'm going to take that one on down as well, and that's quite dark now. That's what I'm trying to achieve. I'm looking at the main there, so I'm going to click OK on that. Okay, now again, it's understanding the process that we're doing. Think of this as the mask, and when you've got a mask on a layer, black is transparent, white is opaque. So in other words, whatever's white we can view, and whatever's black will be transparent, and it will enable us to see below. So that is what we're trying to create, and we're only looking at the horse's mane and its tail. The tail is a little bit harder, but we'll get around that. We'll show you a way to get that much better. So in the first instance, it's analysing the image. This is the best way for this picture. It won't be the best way for all pictures. If you've got a bit of a contrast between the subject and the background, no matter what's in the background, it was fairly dark all over, so that allows us to use this technique. So there's different techniques for different situations. That's what I'm trying to get at. And there's different techniques for different parts of the image. This is only going to work really for the horse's mane. So it's going to work for the areas where the hair is quite tricky and overlapping there into the background. So it's now subtracted that from the background by creating this black area. The rest of the image I'm not really worried about, apart from the tail, and we'll have a look at that later. So what do we do now? Okay, so we're now working on this, and we can actually, let's zoom in. So if I double click, so I can see what we've actually now got. I'm going to hold down the space bar, and that will allow me to drag this, and you can see there's still a few little light areas around. I'm not too worried about those. I'm worried about the area on the edge of this section. Now there's a magic trick that we can use by using a brush. If I select the brush tool, so I'll click on the brush tool there, and we look at the mode on the options bar, it says normal. Now two things I'm going to do. First of all, I'm going to change the mode to overlay. I'm going to change the size of the brush as well, so I'm just going to use the parenthesis keys on the keyboard, which is to the left of the enter key. Just tap that to make it smaller, or you could resize it by going to the options bar there. So I want a small brush, so I've changed it to overlay. The next thing I want to do on the options bar is to change the opacity down quite a bit, so I'm going to click so we're around the 20% mark. 22, that's fine. And having done that, we need to make sure that our foreground colour is black. So make sure that you've got black for your foreground colour. Then what we do is we simply paint over this area. And now if I drag this quickly over there, you can see that it's not deleting the white areas, so I'll just undo that because I don't want to go that far in. But it will not delete the high areas that are white. It will just delete or paint over the black areas, so long as we don't go mad. So I'm just going over these areas that I don't want. A lot of that we can actually leave. So I'm going to paint out any weak areas. It's not looking too bad actually. It's made a reasonable selection. You can see it's picked out these hairs there, but on this area here we need to paint over this and make sure this has got stronger black. It just needs to be a really powerful black. And I may take this overlay, the opacity up. I've changed the flow there, not the opacity. Never mind. We'll take the flow up and bring the opacity down. I made a little mistake there. Sorry about that. There we go. Just so I can paint out these weak areas. Now I'm not bothered too far down the horse's nose there, because I'm only thinking about the edge of this area, and the rest of it's not too bad. I need to make sure that it's black, or as black as I can get it. And it's not done a bad job at all, so that setting has worked really well. When we selected the levels there, we've managed to subtract this quite well. I'm just going to put the opacity level up to 52, and that will just make sure that these areas are black. I'm not painting over the white areas too much now. I'm just painting over the weak areas, such as here. We don't want these lighter areas showing, we want those to be as black as possible. But you can see if I go over slightly on the white areas, it's not going to delete anything that's pronounced, has got a pronounced white to it. It's only going to take down the grey areas as such. Okay, so that's okay, that's looking okay there. Just quickly go over this area. There we go. That's looking fine. Now if I hold down the space bar, that will give me the hand tool, and I can move this around and I can go down to the tail. Now the tail's a little bit trickier, but again, if I use this overlay, and I'm going to take it up slightly, let's take it up about 74 and go over these areas. I'm not going over the white too much, I'm just sticking to the white, to the edge of the white. And we'll just darken the outside of that area. Now it's not going to darken all of it, because whatever's very pale there, it's not going to delete it. It's only going to delete or make black the areas that have got a bit of grey, or they're already quite dark, so it'll only get rid of the dark area. Any light area will remain, and that's why we're using this, because we don't want to eat too much into that white information. Okay, so once we've got round this area, and remember we're only thinking about the edge of this image, we're not worried about what's inside there, because that can be selected much easier in a different way. We're just doing this simply to get that edge detail, to get those hairs as they should be. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change this mode back to normal, and I'm going to take the opacity way up to 100% and just paint over these areas that I definitely don't want. So I'm not going to paint over any white areas, because if I do, then it's going to delete those. I'm going to use a smaller brush there and just go in between these two hairs. Now this is much trickier than the actual mane of the horse, because with the field in the background there's a lot of white areas, or very light areas in the field, that's causing the problem. Don't particularly want any of this. So there we go, we'll paint over that area and over this area. So you have to be a bit careful when you're in normal mode, because you can paint over areas. So it's always a good idea not to, when you're painting, to let go of the mouse now and again. And then if you make a mistake and you do this, you can simply go to edit, undo, and it will just do that part. Now if you keep the mouse button down and you're painting, and then you undo, obviously it's going to delete everything that was done previous with your mouse down. So it's a good idea just release the mouse button after painting a little bit, so that if you need to undo, it's nice and easy to actually do that. Okay, so I'm happy enough with that. That's fine. Now let's look at this. This is quite hard. This tail down here isn't really, it isn't white. It's darker in tone. So first of all, I'm going to strengthen the black, so I'm still in normal mode. Let's just get rid of this, and I'm going to take out any areas that I definitely don't want. I'm going to get rid of that part because later on we're going to add air to this, and I don't want anything that's going to look blocky and nasty, basically. Okay, that should do. I'm not too worried about this part. We're just thinking about the tail here. Make sure that's gone. Okay, let's look at the whole image now, and to do that I double click the hand tool. And now what I want to do is to make a selection of just these areas that I want, and we're just thinking about the edge. Now before we do that, it may help where we've got these horses here especially. I'm going to use a white brush. I'm going to go back to the brush, and I'm on normal mode, and I'm just going to paint over this ear and any other parts that should be solid just around the edge there. And the reason I'm doing that is because those are shadows. They're not, it's not where the actual background is coming through. So we want that to be a solid selection. And we're only going to use in the edge of the selection, so again we haven't got to worry too much. But if it's very close to the edge, it's worth just, and it's solid, you can't see through it, it's opaque, we can't see the background, and it's a good idea just to block that out with a bit of white. Remember, this is not for showing detail of the horse or anything like that, it's just simply to make this selection. Again, the ear I'm not too worried about because that will be selected in a different way. Now what we could do is change this now to overlay. And take the opacity down. Let's take it to about 30% this time. I'm on white, and that will strengthen these white areas. If I just paint quickly over these white areas, only the areas that I want to remain on. If I'm on the inside, this will do a great job of just neatening up, because if I slip into the black like that, you can see it's going to do nothing. Just strengthen that bit up, that bit there, strengthen this area. So using this overlay mode really helps emphasize what we're going to use as a mask. Now I've come over a little bit there, so I'm going to just swap to black and stick to overlay mode, and any weak areas then, if I go over a few times, it will just brush that out a little bit. There we go. So from swapping from black and white, you can strengthen areas or weaken areas. If you've got those little grey areas that are not white or black, you can use that swapping from one to the other to strengthen the white or to strengthen the blacks. Okay, now let's look at the whole image again. So what I want to do now is to use a lasso tool. I want to make sure that the feather is set to 0, so we don't want any feather on this whatsoever. That's really important. I've got it on the options bar on add to selection, so this button here, that means I can select different areas and it won't get rid of the other selection. And what I'm going to do is just draw around this area, so I'm making sure I've got all that main area, the main area of the horse I mean, there we go, within that, and no white areas on the background, so just that actual part that we wanted. We may want a little bit more down here, so I'm going to come down into that. And the horse's tail here, I don't want to go outside this black area, I just want this little bit. That's the only bit I'm worried about. And this little bit of the horse's tail down here. I don't need anything else. Okay, so we've used a channel. We've used those techniques to get a high contrast. And that channel, if we go back to the channels, that's the channel that we're working on. We're not working on the image, we're working on a replication of the blue channel. So that's important to remember, because it's not going to do anything to the image whatsoever. Now I've done that and I've got the selection, make sure I'm on this now, so I'm still on that blue layer. I'm going to get a black brush and I'm going to say go to select and inverse the selection. So select inverse, and what that will do is select everything but those areas that we've just selected, so it's reversed the area around. And once we've done that, we then get a black brush, we make sure that we're not on overlay, we make sure we're on normal, we make sure the opacity is set to 100, and I'm going to use a big brush, so I'm going to resize the brush and I'm just going to paint over the lot of it like this. It will not delete the areas that are not selected, it will just go over with black. Make sure you put a nice thick layer on there so we're covering all the areas from top to bottom. I'm just going to hold down the space bar, make sure there's nothing at the top, and the sides, space bar again, we'll come down the bottom, make sure we're right into the corners, right along the bottom, and then it's select, deselect. So what we've now got is basically white and black. This bit of the horse doesn't matter, we're only worried about the edges of the detail. We go back to the channels. On this channel here, what we need to do on this black area there, what looks like a mask as such almost, if I hold down command, I think it's control on the PC, so just try that, and I click once, what that does is it creates a selection. So you can see now I've got that area selected, whatever's white is selected. And then I can turn this off by going to RGB and clicking that one off. So we've got all of these on, and I'm on the top layer, RGB, which will highlight all of them. And now we need to look at the actual layers. So on layers, we've just got this one layer, background layer. I need to duplicate that. So I right click and I duplicate the layer, click on OK. And what that will do is we've got an exact copy, and now we can apply a mask to that. We've got a selection on, so whatever's selected, when I click the mask button at the bottom there where it says add layer mask, when I click that it will create a mask, and on that, if you just look at this black area there, it's selected just those areas. Now we can see that by turning off this layer. It's hard to see because we're on a clear background, but what's selected there is just the white area of that mask that we've produced from that channel. Now to see it a little bit better, And while I'm looking at that, I've got a bit of a smudge there, so I'm gonna get a black brush. Probably when I've gone over there, I've not. It's very, very slight. You can hardly see it. But if I use a black brush in normal mode, I'm just going to paint over this area, and that has got rid of a little bit I must have missed there. It's very, very faint, but it's a good idea to check that and make sure that you've got no areas that look a little bit dark. There we go. Now, to see this better, if I click on the background layer, which is not being shown at the moment, and I create a new layer. Now, to do that, if we go down again to these little icons at the bottom of the palette and click that button, that creates a new blank layer, and I want to colour that, I think green's the best. So if we go to green on the slider bar there, and we use something like this, click on OK, and then we go to the paint bucket tool and just click. What that will do is it will give us a background so we can see. Double click on this, we can see what we've actually got. Now in this case, I don't think I strengthened the whites enough, but that may just be, I think the edges are okay. Yeah, the edges are okay, it's just the inside. So the actual parts that I want are strong enough. And if you go to the tail, I'm only worried about these edges. That's all I want, so that's nice and bright. If I wanted to make that better, there's another little trick we can do. If I right click on this and click on duplicate layer, click on OK, you can see, because we've got two layers there, that has actually strengthened all of those whites. So it's made it much more pronounced. So once we've done that, I can right click on this layer at the top. So right click, and what we want to do with that, if you go down the list, is merge it down, and that means it's going to merge the two layers together. It will merge it down to the next layer. Do not click on flatten image or merge visible. Make sure you're on the top one and merge it down. And it says the underlying layer as a mask. If this is preserved, then it will mask the merged result. Apply the mask before merging. I don't want to apply it, I want to preserve it at this time, because we may need that later on. So I'm going to preserve the mask, and now we've got those two layers added together, and we've got the layer mask on that. So that's a trick. Now these I took from my lessons on a Friday. We had the class on Friday. I'm going over what we actually done in more detail now, and that was something we didn't have to do. But if you haven't got the levels up quite high enough and you need to emphasize the white more, and remember we're only worried about the hair and the edges of the hair, and it doesn't matter about this inside being a little bit pale, that's fine. That's all we want. In the lesson I think I just got a white brush and I painted over all this, but it's not really needed. We don't need to do that. Okay, so that is our first part. So that is the hair on the mane. We know we can always go back to this layer and get that much more better selection. But we haven't got the rest. If I hide this and I hide this and show the background layer, obviously we've got all the rest of the horse to do. Now the next thing we're going to do, I'm going to duplicate this layer again. So the background layer, right click, duplicate the layer. I've hidden the other layers for now. I'm going to drag this up above this green selection there, so you can hold down the mouse on this area, drag it up. And the reason I've done that is because once I've created a selection on this, I can put that green layer back on and it will hide the background layer, and it just means I can see that I've got the right selection or any areas I'm missing. Okay, so the next stage would be to select the bottom of the horse, or the majority of the horse. We're not worried about the woman so much, we just want to select the bottom of the horse. And the main things I'm worried about are the legs And that is basically it, because if we use select and mask, which is quite often the way you would start, or you could click select subject, if you do that it will pick up areas of the grass and then you've got quite a big job to actually get rid of those. So we use different tools and different layers for different parts of the horse, and that's what makes selection easier. If you try and get everything in one selection, it makes it hard, and it does take time. If you want the perfect selection, you've got to put the time into it. So to select this, then let's double click with the zoom tool, and we are now going to draw around the legs using the curvature pen tool. So the curvature pen tool, if I go to the actual pens on here and hold down the mouse, you will see the curvature pen tool. Now, if you've got the latest version of Photoshop, that will probably be already on that list, so make sure you update it. If not, it may be that you've got it on there but it's not showing, in which case you can actually go to this bar here, and if you click on there and edit toolbar, you will see a list of the tools that aren't included, and you can just click on those and add them to the actual bar. So that's a trick. If you haven't got that there, that's how you get it. So we want the curvature pen tool. Now the pen tool frightens a lot of people, and it even frightened me in the past, but the curvature pen tool is really easy to use. And I'm going to do a little bit of an example. Now I'm not going to do all of this. I've actually got another file where I've gone through this stage, and I'm going to use that file to proceed. So we click, and we're just going to very slightly inside the edge of the subject, and we just keep going along and clicking, and you can see that as we click, some of the shapes behind change shape. But if we look at this one, it's curving and it's not on the edge. Now if I go to this little white dot there and I double click that, it changes it to a straight line. And if you didn't want a straight line, it's still not on there, you can click in between and you can drag and get it exactly how you want. So this is why this tool is so easy to use. Then once you've done that, you go back to your end one and you just continue to click, and you can go back at any time to edit this or add other points. So I'll drag this one down there, so you're not stuck with what you've got, and that's the beauty of this. So we're going around clicking, you can do this. See, it curves, it actually curves for you, so sometimes you can go, and then if it's not quite on the line, you can click and add another point and just drag it to where you want it. That should be straighter, so I'll double click that one and you can see that it's straight on the line. And click up here, looks fine, click there, and so on and so on. I'm going to hold down the space bar when I get there, and that will, keeping the space bar down, that will allow me to drag using the hand tool. I'm just going to click straight up there, and then I can click points on this to bring it to where I want it. So this is great for where you've got these smooth lines as such on the horse, because it will give us a really nice edge. I'm going to click up there, and then I can drag this out. Keep adding points. So you can see how the tool works now, and you can carry on around there, keep clicking your points on, double clicking to straighten the line up to here. Now I'm not too worried now about the rest of the horse above this point, So I'm going to come to here, and then I'm going to kind of cross the horse. I'm only worried about the bottom section of the horse really, but we'll come over to this side, come down to where the horse's leg starts, and then we'll continue around here, around these edges. Now I'm not actually going to do that because it's just going to take too long, the video would be too long. So what I'm going to do is move over to this file, double click the hand tool, and if we look at the layers on this, I've got exactly the same. That should be under here. There we go. I've got missed a little selection on there. We've got those two hidden at the moment. We duplicated the background and we're working on this layer. And if I go, this is the next stage. Once you've made your selection and you've gone all around there, you would then go to, if you can't see it on here, you would go to paths. Now if you can't see paths, click on window, and if it's missing and you click on paths from this list, it's in alphabetical order. So if you click there, you will then see the path. Now it will come up there as, I forget what it's called, it's just called path, work path or something like that. But you need to name that path. If I click on this, so when you finish, you will actually see, if I click switch to the pen tool, I'm just going to click on here. So that's my selection gone round there. Just need to edit that one, there we go. So you can see I can edit at any stage, I can come back and edit on this. A little bit there I didn't like. That's okay though, because that'll get picked up later anyway, so I'm not too worried about that. But what you would then have to do, where it says work path there, you would double click it, and that highlights the text, and you need to give it a name. And once you've given it a name and press enter, that will save the selection so it doesn't go away. That's important to do. Okay, so I've called it lower horse, so I'll press enter, that's fine, that's what I want to call it. So that's the stage you would do. Obviously I had to switch from one image to the other just to, so if you look at the whole image now, double click the hand tool, that is the selection that I've made. So this part is just the lower half. So let's think what we've done. We've used the channels, we've got a selection of the horse's mane, the outside of the mane, we've got the bits with the tail on and whatever, so that's fine. And now we've got this selection which is helping us get the bottom area of the horse and the legs. Now what we need to do now is to right click on this path and click on make selection. It will come up with feather radius and all that, don't worry about that, just click on OK, nothing else. And what you then get is that selection. Okay, so there we have the selection. Now if I go back to my layers, I've got this duplicate of the actual background, so I'll make sure that I'm on this layer, and what I now do is click on the mask, add mask layer. So the layer mask is now on there. So let's see what we've got now. If I turn this green back on and I turn this one back on, we've got the horse's mane. No, we've got the bit of the horse's head as well, but that's probably not brilliant. All I'm looking at, I've got this area that I want along here, and I've got the horse's tail there. Okay, so now the next stage, that's two different things we've done. Let's duplicate this layer again. So I'm going to right click on the background layer, duplicate the layer, click on OK, drag it above the green. Okay, now when I do that, I can see all of the image. I'm going to turn off the two at the top. So by clicking on the eyes, we're not seeing those now. They're still there, but we've hid them. And I'm working on this layer. Must make sure that you're on the right layer, otherwise things don't work. Okay, so now we're on this layer. We're going to do what most people do in the first place when making a selection, and that's to use this tool, which is the quick selection tool. And now there is a feature in Photoshop called select subject. Now you don't have to go to that tool to do that now if you've got the latest version. If you go to select on the menu, you can see you've got color range focus area that you've always had, and now you've got subject. So you've got those different things that you can select. So you've also on this tool got that button select subject on the options bar. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to close this other image now because I don't need that. Don't save. So I'm working on this one. Okay, so working on this layer now, we're going to click select subject. Now what this does, it uses artificial intelligence and it tries to select what you actually want. Yeah. Now the important thing on this is we want the horse's head on there. That's important because we've got most of the body. We want all of the woman selected. That's important. We're not too worried about the horse's mane because we can get by with that. Another area we're worried about is the girl's hair. That we need to work on. So first thing I'm going to do is, well, I've got the legs. So what I'm actually going to do, let's just zoom in on this, and I'll zoom into this area. Now we haven't got this area of the dress selected, so that needs to be included. On this tool, so if we go back to that tool there, the quick selection tool, on the options bar select the minus, so subtract from selection. Sorry, yeah, there we go. We want subtract. So I'm going to get a brush, I'm going to click once in that area and keep clicking to remove that bit of grass. So I need to resize the brush. So just one click at a time just to get that tuck away. Yeah. Now I'm not worried about that it's missing some of the leg. I'm not worried about the legs at all. Don't need it. This part, however, I do want to keep that because he has made a better selection than I made actually with that, so that's fine. Okay, so let's remove the areas that don't. Let's add areas first. So we need to click on plus. We're missing a little bit along here. I'm just clicking on the edge here just to make sure we've got this woman's dress. Let's just go along here. Bit of the dress there. Fine with that, that's looking good. I'm not too worried about the horse's tail, we can get rid of that later. It's making a reasonable selection around this area. I just want to click on minus and we'll just take away this little bit. So I'm just clicking in between the hair strands there. A bit there. I'm not going overboard on this because we're going to use a technique to get rid of that anyway, but if there's any big parts you can click and subtract those. Okay, that'll do, that's fine. We need to add this area of the hair. So we're just clicking, so we're swapping from add and we need to go down this area of the hair on the face. Hold down the space bar, move across here. We've got this area. Now this bit of the hair I don't actually like, so I'm going to leave that off. So I'm not worried about selecting that part. We can make that better ourselves. The rest of it is looking pretty good. Okay, so at this stage what I then do is to click this other button on the tool, select and mask. And you got different views on select and mask. You won't have the same one as me, but let's choose one of these selections. I'm going to use the red overlay. I think is quite good for this. It does show up quite well. And we're looking at this second tool here going down the left hand side, refine edge. So we click on that. I'm going to make the brush, probably the brush is okay around that size. I'm going to click, I'm not going into the subject too deep. I'm going to click and just go along the edges there. I'm going to come into the area where I want it to disappear. So I'm keeping the button down. I want to get look so the area is transparent where it needs to be. I'm not going to go over the top. Okay, now you'll see that I've made a bad selection there. It's retained a lot of the hair, but we've got these weak areas around now. I'm not worried about those because I can get rid of those quite easily. So I'm going to leave those on. I'm not going to try and mess about because that's not too bad a selection. The horse's mane, just this part here, I will come down and we'll try that. We'll see. We'll do the horse's mane while we're here. It's actually, we're not making too bad a selection with this. But the beauty is now we've got two layers. If we haven't got what we want there, and it looks like I may actually get what I want. But if I haven't, I can revert and use other tools. Now, another important part is the horse's head. I need to make sure that I've got all of this included. We're not losing any of the horse. This area should not be there. And you can see it's getting rid of it slowly, but not as quick as I'd like. So in this case, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this tool on the left hand side, which is simply a paint tool, and make sure it's on minus, and I'm going to paint out these areas by hand. So you've got to be a little bit careful when you're doing this. We can always just touch this up later, so don't be worried if you've not got it perfect. The nice thing about layers is you can always go back and you can play to your heart's content to get what you need. If your part's missing or and the weak areas we can get rid of much easier using a different tool. Now we're losing the horse's nose, so again while we're on this paint one we'll click on plus and I'll just paint and make that stronger along the edge there where I know all these areas. And I'm not bothered if I come over the edge a little bit, because what I can do with that is then revert back to this tool and I can just the refine edge tool and just neaten that up again. So if we keep strengthening an area, this needs to go. It's getting messy again, so again I'm going to revert back to this one and make sure it's on minus. It's on plus, minus, there we go. Make sure these little weak areas are out there. Click back on plus, we'll draw this bit back in. Command Z on that big because I didn't get what I want. There we go. Click on minus and just remove that little bit there. Okay, that's not looking too bad. There's little bits there I can neaten up later. So I'm happy enough with that. I'm just going to click on OK. So we go back to our layers and I add a layer mask to that. To add that mask to there. So now what we've got, let's have a look what we've got. Actually, it hasn't done a bad job round here. If I click on this one, I may just strengthen that a little bit. Let's have a look. The hair isn't looking too bad. Now this area around here looks terrible. Yeah, this is why we use the other technique to get the legs. So I'm going to click this one on, and you can see the hooves have appeared now because you didn't select the hooves on that selection. And what I'm going to do, making sure I'm on this mask, which is all of this area, and you see the legs, they change. Doesn't look right at all, does it? Okay. So what we want to do is, I'm looking first of all where this cuts out. I'm only worried about this area there. So what I'm going to do, put this back on, click on the mask, get a black brush, set it to 100%, make sure it's in normal mode, and I'm just going to delete, so I'm painting out the legs. And they're not going to go anywhere. I'm not going to do this area because it's made a good selection there, so I'm going to do the legs from this point. Just click and delete that part of the mask. And we can check that we've deleted it. You can see that that little black picture there is showing me what's been deleted. So that area was mainly for the legs. And there we go. So we've got most of it now. Let's just look up here. Okay, now we've got a few weak areas. Now, probably using the mode that we used for the tail and the... We've managed to do it with a mask, but it's nice to have the two, to be honest. That's got a little bit more on there, so it just gives a bit more detail. So let's have a look at the tail. Now the tail, if I hide this one that we're on, the selection on the edge of the tail isn't so good. Yeah. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to delete on this layer, which is the one with all this on. I'm going to delete the area of the tail on this. So again, we use a black brush, and I'm just going on the edge of the tail. Use a smaller brush, and we'll just delete that just along the edge. And we keep the selection we made originally on this top layer. So you can see that's that layer on the top, that's the one with just a little bit of the tail on the main. Let's double click now and look at what we've got. And I think we've got a reasonable selection now. The only downside of it all is these areas around there. See, we've got these spots here around the hair. So that again is on this layer. We can check what layer we're on by actually clicking and doing that. So we're on this layer. So I'll click on the mask and I get a black brush, and we change again to overlay. So we change the mode, and then I'm going to click. Now the opacity is at 100%. Let's take that down, and I'm just going to click. And a quick drag over those areas will delete any those bits that are weak, but remain anything that's strong there. I'm not going to go too mad. This area is terrible, so I need to do quite a bit up this top area. So I'm clicking, dragging. I'll probably take the opacity up a bit. Let's take it up there. So you can see that's weakening that black area. It's not totally black, it's like grey, so we'll get rid of that on the edge there by repeatedly going over it. And there we've got rid of it. And the next stage is the magic bit of how we can actually paint hair ourselves to get back that hair on the girl. Now the horse actually hasn't come out too bad. When we done the lesson, we did actually have to do a bit of work on that. I will probably use, because we've got the two layers on here, I can afford to use that overlay, which is set quite powerful, making sure I'm on the right layer on there. I'm going to go along the edge and weaken this quite considerably. And what that will do is delete any weak areas on this layer and just keep those strong areas that are actually on the top layer. So using that method in the first instance was well worth it, because we will have a much cleaner line on the hair. Do this area as well. We will have to bring a bit of that area back in, and to do that, if we zoom in, you can see we've lost a lot of this. And what I'm going to do this, if I go to the layers, we've got the background layer on, and if I click on this green layer and take the opacity down just slightly, what that allows me to do is to see the areas that I'm missing. So we go back to this layer mask, we click on there, and we need a white brush now, and we don't need overlay, we need normal mode, and we have to paint a little bit more careful now. So I'm going to make the brush smaller, and I need the opacity up all the way. I'm just carefully going to paint over this mask on the areas that I'm missing. You see, it's not too hard to do, because I've got that guide in the background to show me what's underneath. So we're just clicking, reduce the size of the brush, put this area back in. Now at any time we can just hide the back layer and we can see how much of that we've actually got. So there's quite a bit we're still missing. I need to paint over that more strongly. Clicking, dragging. Paint that there in there. Now probably what I want to do is to get a hard brush on this, because obviously with a soft brush it's feathered on the edge, and it's feathering the edge, and we want an actual hard selection on these bits especially. So I think we're almost there now. It takes a little time doing things like this. It's worth taking time because you'll end up with a perfect selection. It's hard to get anywhere else except putting the work in. Okay, let's just hide the background there now. And I'll just see, that's fine. Okay. Double click the hand tool, let's put this layer back on, and we'll change the opacity of this back up. There we go. So the next stage is to do the hair. So let's zoom in. I'm going to check this over now because I think at this stage I'm happy enough to say I can merge these layers together, which is just going to save a bit on the memory side of things. So I don't want this layer, but if I click on these three top layers and I right click, and what I want to do is to merge the layers. Now this time it will get rid of that mask, so that mask has actually gone now. So we've got everything now on that one layer. Now because we've got everything on the one layer, let's protect that, so I'm going to duplicate it just in case anything goes wrong, and then I'm going to hide the one so that one's safe. Okay, so there's our cutout, and now we just want to work on the hair. So I'm going to zoom in on this, and the way we do this is we actually draw the hair. I'm going to make sure I'm below this selection, so below the top selection. I'm going to put a new layer on there. This is the one we are going to paint the hair on. Now I'm going to put dark hair. So the dark hair of the model. And let's just move her over a little bit so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to get the paintbrush tool. I'm going to go to my colour selector, and what I'm going to do is to sample the colour of the hair. So to do that, I just move the colour selector down, I go to the hair that I want to select, and I want a dark area. So I'll click, here we go. Now what I'm going to do, at the sample size there, I'm going to click on point sample, and that will give me the exact colour that I click on rather than an average. Okay, so something from about that area, that's okay. So I'm going to click OK. When you're happy with the colour, I'm going to change the brush down to about, I'm going to use 2 pixels. Now if you can't drag it onto that using the slider, just type it in. It's much easier. 2px, and then press enter. There we go. So now what we do is we draw some hair. Now when we're drawing with this tool, I'm just going to show you what it actually does. If I make sure that we got the opacity on 100%, the flow on 100%, I'm going to use not a hard brush but a soft brush. which will make it more realistic. And when I click and drag, you can see that I can draw quite smoothly. So how do I get that? Just get rid of that. And that's the smoothing. So the smoothing control, if you adjust this, if I take it off completely and I try and draw a straight line, you can see I wiggle around and it looks like that. So you can use this smoothing to smoothen the effect of when you draw. I'm going to try it at about 30%. Now for this part I am going to use a graphics tablet just because it's quicker, but you can use the mouse. But I just want to do something really quick in this case. So we've got the pen there. And remember, I'm behind this selection. That's important to remember. So when I actually draw, if there's anything in front of what I've got, it's not going to show. So I'm going to draw hair. And you haven't got to be a great artist with this, so we're just filling this in. And I'm drawing around these weak areas. So I'm just adding some air in this area. Just so it looks a little bit more realistic than just having a gap there. If we zoom in a bit more, so let's go to the zoom tool. Let's get rid of this for the time being and go back. So back to my brush. Now there is a technique as well to make the hair look a little bit more realistic, but I'm not actually going to use it in this case because it's not that detailed. I mean, we're zoomed in quite a lot on this, and the image is not going to be massive when it's completed. If it was more detailed, such as a model in a studio or something like that, I might do that. We may do it after just to have a look, but in this case it's not too bad. Now where we've got these clumpy bits of selection, I'm going to make sure I go over those, or under them rather, and just fill those areas in a little bit. And what we're going to do after is we're going to draw some more hair, but we're going to come over the top of the layer. So using the space bar to use the hand tool to... Now here we have actually missed a little bit of the layer, so I need to paint that out really. So I come below that, but I can't paint over it because if I paint anywhere here, that's painting behind the model because we're behind this layer. So we'll do that after, and rather than delete it, I'll just add some air over the top. Okay, let's show you this technique. I'll see if it works. It may work on this. We'll just have a look. If I go to the area that I'm actually drawing on, so on this layer where we've got dark hair, if I hold down Command or Control and click on this layer, what it does is it makes a selection, and it selects the areas that we've drawn on there. Now if I inverse that selection, what it will actually do is select everything but the hair. Where am I? Select. There we go. Select inverse. It's my age. Okay, so we've now got everything selected to the hair, and when I use the backspace key on the keyboard, it will delete anything in that area. Now there's nothing in that area, but what it will do is soften the edge of what isn't selected. It always eats into it slightly. So if I press the backspace key once, Let's just have a look what it's done. Select, deselect. And it's just softened that. So what it's done, if you look at this hair now, it hasn't got that so much that round effect to it where we was drawing before. It's actually softened the effect. And if I go to edit, let's just go to the, sorry, we'll go to the history. And if you look at the hair, let's move this in a little bit. If we look at the hair here, and I toggle this back, let's go to there. So if you look at the hair there, and we look at it there, see the difference? It just doesn't smooth it, it actually makes it rougher, which makes it look more realistic. So that's a little technique to use. If it doesn't work, you can always use the history and go back on that, but it does give you a more realistic effect. Sometimes you have to go over it again and redo little parts, but that's it. Okay, so let's look at other parts of the head. So now I need to go back. I don't want the pen tool. I'm just going to draw. And this area. I'm not going to go mad on this because you've got the idea now. But you see I'll put some little flyaways in there, just make it look more realistic. And when you've done so much, you can also create a new layer and do it, and that way it will just have more realism, and you can, you know, use that technique that we just used on the one layer and not so much on the other one if you need to. Obviously if I do it again now on this layer, it's going to make the other hair that I've already drawn a lot thinner. So it's something you would do last on the layer. And I haven't got, when you're drawing on this and you're drawing below the layer, remember, so don't worry about coming into the face of the subject. You haven't really got to worry about that at all. Space bar down. Remember, we're really zoomed in on this, so when you see this hair at natural the normal size, it's going to look a lot more effective than zoom straight in your pixel counting. And again, I'm painting under this, I can really just scribble underneath these areas that I need to fill in. Okay, so you've got the idea now. So the next thing I'm going to do is just put a bit more on here. Obviously you'd have more time. But I'm going to come to the to layers, create a new layer on the top there, and I'm going to change the colour of the hair to this lighter colour that she's got there. Something about that. And now we're working on the top. So what I can now do is just draw some little bits to add a bit more texture to the hair. We can always revert back to another colour and draw over the top as well. So we'll do that. Let's get a darker colour. I want to come over this area. And I'm almost scribbling on this part. I want to fill in this area because I really don't like the hair there. Yeah, so fill in this area in. You can do this behind as well. Sometimes it's slightly better. So it can, you know, depending on how bad the hair is, it can take some while to do this. And don't worry about that green showing through. Obviously you're not going to have green. Depends on your background. If you've got a dark background, you're not going to see a lot of this anyway. So it depends on the colour background that you're using. If you've got quite a dark background, those bits behind the hair are not going to show. Remember, if you was a bit done and you don't like it, you've always got the delete tool to undo what you've done. Any bits you don't like, you can delete and do again. Okay, I'm gonna probably leave it at that because you don't want to watch me do all this, but you know what to do now. Okay, so let's just use that technique again. So if I go back to the layers and I command click this or control click it, inverse the selection, and I'm just going to press backspace once, select deselect, and that will just make the hair look a little bit more realistic. Let's locate it, zoom out now, and you can see that we've got the majority of this done now. Now there's still lots of other things we can do, and I'm going to stop this video at this moment. We'll do that in another video. That is the first stage. We can adjust the light and we can add backgrounds and whatever. Now we've got that selection. What I'm going to do is put that back, there we go. I'm going to go to the layers, and I'm going to select these 3 layers now. Only do this when you're happy with it, and I'm going to right click with the mouse, and again I'm going to merge those layers together. What you then need to do, you need to interrupt now, is save that as a PSD file, and then if you're going to carry on to a later stage, you need to save that as a PSD file, and then it will retain all those layers that you've got. You're not going to lose them. Okay, so that's it for part 1 of the video.